With the start of my first word, my time will begin. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining the first Constructive Speech and Debate podcast. This is a podcast for everything speech and debate in Texas. Our names are Ryan Stokes and Kenny Adcock, and we are excited to continue this journey with you. As we begin to work through the upcoming season, it is our goal to share some stories, introduce you to experts, and facilitate conversations that we hope will help you throughout your season. So whether you are a coach, student, competitor, or parent trying to figure out what crazy event your student participates in, welcome to the show. Today, we are joined by Preston Stole. Preston is the CX debate coach at Winston Churchill High School and is one of the most involved coaches in Texas and throughout the country. He's a staple of the debate community and is on several committees at the regional, state, and national levels. His accomplishments as a debater, coach, and advocate are too numerous for me to list out in the intro. And we are so excited to have him on with us today to talk about next year's CX topics. So, Preston, welcome.
Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to do this.
So we've got a few questions for you before we get into the topic selection and the 5 areas that were discussed over the summer. So Kenny, do you want to start out the question period?
So I think it's really important to highlight you talk about Preston's success. Man, it was incredible to be at the national tournament this year and watch you guys work. My team actually followed your team throughout rounds as they were sitting there walking through and talking with them. I think they actually became pretty good friends, so I appreciate that. But your run didn't stop there, man. You got to coach a national finalist. Talk to us about that and what that meant to you, what that experience was like. How'd that go?
I think the experience was pretty surreal. I don't think going into the tournament we expected anything like that. I know nationals is a solid mix of luck and opportunity, and so certainly have never had that sort of success at the national tournament. And so it was just one of those things that kept happening one round at a time. We kept joking because the plan initially was to go to the Grand Canyon on Friday. That eventually we weren't going to be able to do that. And so the reality sort of set in that we were obviously not going to be able to do the Grand Canyon. And it was like a cool experience. It was a great way to send some seniors out. It was a good moment, full circle for those kids. They started debating together as freshmen. They're best friends. And honestly, there's times that it's still very surreal. Part of me just wants to say it's just another tournament. And I wish we would have won, 2 more ballots and finals than we did. But there's times that I was forwarding a file to someone else that we used in one of the elim rounds there, and then got to get a little nostalgic about it. So you certainly still think about it, and you're like, oh yeah, that was kind of cool. After you've had time to process it and stuff.
Yeah, that's cool.
Now this question's not on the script, but I think it's important, man. We've seen a huge trend in the female debater and advocacy for those. Will you share a little bit about what it meant to you to have an all-female finals?
So my understanding when we got called in to the tab room after the semifinals debate was that this was the first time that has, at least to the best of their knowledge, ever happened in nationals even.
Wow.
So that was a really cool experience to have an all non-male final. I was very caught up in just the fact that I thought it was very funny that it was Claire and Brooklyn versus Claire and Brooklyn. And so that was obviously a little more humorous to me, but I think that the moment certainly doesn't escape me or the kids on how cool that was, because I do know that there have been kind of criticisms and even national championship winning speeches recently about kind of the gender disparity that sometimes arises in speech and debate. So I think that that's hopefully a moment that shows that there's good things to come for the debate community, and that we're moving in the right direction on issues such as that.
Cool. So tell us, what was the National Policy Convention like in Portland this summer?
So Portland weather is amazing. Coming from Texas, where it was, 100 degrees for however many, 30-something straight days. The first thing was we got to Portland and landed, and it was 75 degrees and sunny out. And I spent the whole first day just sort of taking in being able to have incredible weather. But the topic committee is really cool. It's the second meeting that I've gone to. I enjoyed a lot. Now that I am no longer one of the topic paper writers, UIL's kind of rotation is a 2-year one. So the first year you go to a meeting and watch, and the second year you write. I'm kind of get to contemplate whether or not I want to keep going to those topic meetings. But I enjoy the meeting itself. There's a lot that goes into the wording process. I think that sometimes people think that these topics sort of appear out of nowhere. But the policy process is long and it's drawn out, and there's 50, 60 people in this room from all across the country. So it's a fun experience because you get to meet coaches from all sorts of high schools, from all sorts of states. You get to like hang out with them, you're talking, debate things some of the time. But they do a really good job of also making the experience not one that is solely focused on like topic work. There's a nice like kind of evening like retreat sort of thing that you get to do where wherever it is locally, put something together. You know, last year we went to a museum and had like a dinner that was like catered into this museum. And then this year we were on like a dinner cruise sort of thing that took us up and down like the river in Portland. And so it's like nice to be able to like get out and experience the city, and meet friends. I've met a couple people at these meetings I knew, got to meet a couple of new people who I'm like really good friends with now, from around the country. And so it's a fun experience. You have to do work to get there. But once you're there, it's like kind of fun. There are some stressful moments. Once your paper is submitted, it's kind of out of your hands. You're asked to defend the paper and answer questions, but everyone gets to make comments, thoughts, revisions, etc. to your paper. But I really like the process. I thought that this year's process was really well done. It was really streamlined. I enjoyed the fact that we started off with debatability roundtables discussing the debatability of the topics. And I think that helps sort of focus in so that we got a slate of what I think are like 5 like pretty good topics that I think are all fairly debatable. There's not really any landmines or anything like that in any sort of significant way, I think, on the topic slate. And I think a lot of that was doing the debatability bit so that when we got to discussions of wording, we were able to really like hone in and kind of discuss papers that would make viable topics a little more thoroughly than maybe it always is. So I think that was like really cool.
Now,
Cool.
you went on behalf of the UIL, correct?
I was the UIL representative this year, correct. And so next year, I believe that'll be Rory McKenzie. He was there observing this year. And so that means he'll write a paper this following year. And so, yeah, so it was a fun experience,
So how do you, I guess for those who might be interested in one day being a representative for the UIL out to the national convention, like how does one like work their way towards that role?
One, I think I would just let Jana know that you're interested. Jana Riggin, sorry for those who are watching and maybe don't know who Jana is when I say that. Because I think that it is an undertaking that one has to be willing to do. So Jana reached out to me actually and was just like, would you be interested in doing this? And my first response was like, oh, I'm not really sure on that. It sounds like a lot of work. And then she was like, well, you get to go to Portland. And I was like, okay, let's talk a little more about this. Like, that sounds really nice. But I do think that they're always sort of looking. And I think that because the UIL very much seems to like to rotate people, I think that means that they are always needing new people who are interested in sort of doing the undertaking for the topic writing process. And you're not really alone in it. I know that Jana and Rich Edwards offered, help advice if, anyone ever needs it, but also they sort of reformed the topic writing process too, to try and encourage more papers to get from initial conception through completion. And that kind of, I think, was very useful, especially as someone who is like a first-time topic paper writer, even just like having some little info sessions where you could ask questions of other topic paper writers and just having deadlines to meet, like, when you're a teacher, the deadlines are largely self-imposed. So it was nice to have a little bit of a structure where it was like, on these dates, you need to have these things, so that I could make sure that I was constantly sort of moving forward with the paper and not like getting stuck. But if anyone is interested in writing a paper, there is no requirement that you have to be a state representative. So for example, I was the UIL representative, but Clint Adams, the past 2 years, at least, I think longer, has submitted a paper and attended the meeting, and anyone can do that. So you don't have to be your state's representative. UIL is actually very, very organized in how, we have a representative and we have, both Jana and Rich always go along with the representative. We have the new representative, but some states, their delegate at the meeting is just a person who is interested in having the vote, or whichever person from that state that you're decided to write a paper. So there's no limit on how many papers you can write, though I would say, like, the undertaking to write more than one is a pretty hefty one. But there's also no limit on who can attend. So in fact, one of the papers that made the slate of 5 was written by 2 high school students from Missouri, who wrote a paper and submitted it and came to the meeting. So anyone can attend if interested. And if you're interested in being the UL representative, the perks of that is they cover your travel cost. And so you kind of get to do that experience without having to pay for it out of your pocket or school budget. And if it's just also for people who write a paper and maybe aren't part of a delegation, they also pay a small stipend for writing those papers. It doesn't fully offset the cost of travel, but it certainly helps. So definitely you can make that meeting worth it. It's a fun meeting. It's a cool group of people. So
that's cool. So I guess that takes us kind of into the actual topic areas, the 5 that were highlighted and sent out for everybody to vote on here recently. And I really enjoyed reading over them and talking to my team about what do y'all want to possibly debate next year, and how do we want to use our vote. So I guess, Preston, if you're okay with it, we're going to kind of ask you some questions about the 5 that were selected and just kind of go through them.
Yeah, I'm excited. I know that the vote for UIL is due relatively soon. I think it's October 10th. So for those watching this, get out there and vote. I do think we have 5 strong papers. I don't think there's any landmines, but I do have thoughts on all the papers and things that I think are unique and interesting about them. So,
Kenny, you want to lead off with the first one?
So I actually think the first one is potentially my number 1. Because I'm an FFA kid that stepped into the debate world. So problem area 1 is ag subsidies. Resolution as it is currently, the United States federal government should substantially decrease its agricultural subsidies for domestic agriculture. My first kind of core question, but I'm going to allow you to kind of share what you saw at the debatable roundtable that you talked about, is really off the top of your head or off of those conversations, what are some core affirmative policies that you think are going to come out of that? And kind of on the backside, right, where do you think the core negative argument's going to be? Is it going to be T argumentation, disadvantage argumentation? Like this year, I think the counterplan debate is going to be really healthy. So where do you think those debates are going to happen most?
Yeah, absolutely. This paper is probably, it was one of my 2 that I submitted my vote on. It was one of my top 2 last year when it made the slate of the final 5. So I was lucky enough to re-sponsor this paper. My friend Lauren, who is the head debate coach at Alpharetta High School in Georgia, actually is the one who wrote the paper last year and submitted it, but she took a spot on the wording committee itself, and so they're not able to submit papers. So I got to submit this paper and defend it. And really just didn't think there was a lot of changes to be made. I think this topic is really cool. I know that it will be a topic that even if there are cases that occasionally tangentially discuss agriculture, I know there was at least some arguments about agriculture on the water topic and water efficiency for farms. But we've not had an agriculture topic at the high school or college level since before children who are freshmen were born. Which is like a terrifying statistic, because I know that because it was the college topic in 2009, which was my senior year of high school, and I now have freshmen who were born in 08 and 09. So that's a little terrifying. But I thought it was really cool when I was in high school. I went to a 1A high school, shout out Thorndale, Texas. And so it was cool to see a debate topic that I had some knowledge of, just given my dad was a farmer. I grew up on a farm, and yet did not and was not by any means an expert on the topic. And so I think it was cool to me when I was in high school to see how deep you could sort of get and how much more you could learn about something that is very intimately related to your life. And then I also just think for any and everyone, this topic has a lot of applicability to learning about how the food gets from the farm to your table and how subsidies sort of work in America. So because it was a college topic, the college topic was just a slightly more narrow version of this one, where it listed out the specific crop commodities that subsidies could be reduced for. This is a slightly wider version because it's for high school. But I think that there is a core set of affirmative cases. The easiest and most obvious one that comes to mind is subsidies for corn. It's a huge subsidy market in America. It's one that there's a lot of literature on, that we kind of push corn subsidies in order to help a lot of America's farmers, which is maybe a good thing, but also it means that we incentivize the use of corn products in a myriad of ways. High fructose corn syrup being in all sorts of like unhealthy foods. The fact that corn biofuel ethanol is like kind of the predominant biofuel ethanol, even though there's other more efficient versions of ethanol out there. And so that's kind of the first case that sticks out. I also remember from the college topic, there were a lot of arguments about reducing subsidies for CAFOs. There were subsidies that were also wheat and grain. There's some pretty common ones on that. And I think that that's where you'll see the core set of kind of affirmatives, and probably like novice packet affirmatives sort of focuses on across the board, reduce and or eliminate subsidies for XYZ commodity, right? Eliminate subsidies for corn, or substantially reduce subsidies for corn, or substantially reduce subsidies for CAFOs or something like that. One interesting thing that sort of came out of the debatability roundtable, that one of the benefits of this process is you get people who are college debate people as well. Some good questions they had was just, we discussed whether we wanted to limit the term subsidy to refer to something that's like a direct payment, because the definition of subsidies can also refer to indirect subsidies, such as trade policies, tariffs, things like that. And so I think as the topic gets older and expands throughout the year, we'll start to see some creativity with respect to affirmatives that defend reducing indirect subsidies for various products and things like that. I think that gets you new advantage areas such as like international trade and things of that nature. So I think that it has the potential to be a diverse topic. I think it's a good topic. I think that topics where the affirmative has to take a controversial action are generally, I think, good, because they create a substantial amount of negative ground. I think this topic would be a controversy for sure. I think on the negative side, you have access to core topic disads. The ag industry disad is a huge one. Subsidies are important and very much useful for farmers. And I think that the affirmative will be limiting or eliminating subsidies that are still going to definitely affect the ag industry. Obviously, I don't think we'll see affirmatives that end something like drought relief programs, because I don't know if there's a defense of why we should do that. But certainly removing subsidies for corn would very much upset the ag industry. It would drastically affect farmers across the country. And I think that that's an interesting thing for people to learn about, because the ag industry is a huge driver of the American economy, and also the world economy, as it sort of like spills over, and U.S. ag tech is sort of exported around the world pretty generally. You also have the food prices disad. Any subsidy that affects any sort of commodity crop food is going to raise food prices by eliminating that subsidy. We saw, the volatility that can happen with food prices, even with things like the war in Ukraine. And then I also just think that the politics disad is going to be good and real and true, because I think very much like this topic with this year's topic, which is, a large action that, I think is politically unpopular with the GOP. Subsidies are a sacred cow of the Republican Party. Farmers are a key constituent base for them, which means a policy that eliminates or nearly eliminates subsidies is going to be one that I think is going to be pretty popular, or pretty unpopular, which makes the policy disad like a popular argument to read. Likewise, I think there's going to be a lot of like good and creative counter plans. I think that the easiest like core topic counter plan that comes to my mind is one that attempts to not eliminate subsidies, but rather add new subsidies, or make the existing subsidies dependent on reforms in the ag industry. I think you're going to get a lot of debate about whether the subsidies themselves are sort of important. One of the things that I like about this topic is that it's insulated from the state's counterplan. That's not going to really be a worry for the state's counterplan to solve the affirmative, given that these subsidies come directly from the federal government. And then the critical ground on the topic is pretty interesting. We have a long history of agriculture in our country. There's a lot of ways that it intersects with all sorts of like various K literature bases, whether that is labor or race or gender or things like that. And I think that even like the critical affirmatives, if you want sort of topical critical affirmatives, there is a lot of criticism and very nuanced criticism of the ways in which ag policy shapes everything from school lunch availability to food deserts and things like that. So I think it's an interesting topic. It's certainly not an issue that we discuss regularly, which means I think that kids and coaches alike are going to learn a lot, which, at least in my experience, my personal opinion, those are the topics that I like the most, are the ones where I'm incentivized to learn something new. So I think that's pretty exciting.
Cool. All right, let's move on to the second area, which is American Arctic policy, which want to shout out Adams, right, from Big Spring, Texas, who was the author of this topic, which is just awesome, right? But resolved, the United States should substantially increase the military presence and/or economic development in the Arctic region. So, kind of the same thing. Like, what kind of affirmative policy core staples do you think we might see? And once again, how does the net ground look on a topic like this?
Yeah, so I think that Clint did a great job of defending this paper at the topic committee meeting. And I think that there were, if you look at like the original topic paper versus the wording that came out, there were some changes to narrow it some. But that's because the Arctic is like a large sort of like advantage area. It's an area that's underexplored. I think that the benefit of this, and I know some people sometimes view these as disadvantages for both this topic and then one that we'll discuss later on, is that it's has some relation to topics that we've debated previously. There's some overlap of the NATO stuff relating to affirmatives on that topic about the Arctic. And then obviously the current National Public Forum topic is the United States federal government should increase its military presence in the Arctic. So I think that that provides some very clear and easy like novice affirmative cases that will be easily fleshed out and put together, that are core of the topic, that we know exist, that we know have good literature and clash over. Icebreakers is sort of like an evergreen affirmative. Everyone loves to talk about the U.S. lack of icebreakers. I think you're also going to see stuff about anti-submarine warfare in order to counter like Russia's kind of increasing sub-presence. And then also, depending on your definition of like military presence or something like that, then you can also see stuff like information gathering, info sharing, those sort of things in the Arctic region. I also think because this topic talks about economic like development in the Arctic region, I think that you can potentially see affirmatives. We've definitely looked at them on our team on various topics about potentially like drilling in the Arctic region. Obviously, that is why so many countries who are considered Arctic countries have a concern with it, is that there are oil reserves there, and there is a balance to be struck between capitalizing on those energy reserves and also protecting like sort of the Arctic environment. And so I think that there is probably an Arctic drilling case to be made. And I think that that case also will have like pretty substantial case debate against it. I think that the PF topic also provides a good lens of what a lot of our negative debates will look like, which is that increasing Arctic presence is going to increase tensions, specifically with Russia. It's a contested area, but also with countries like China who want a larger Arctic presence. China's been advocating to be an honorary member of the Arctic Circle or Arctic Council for years now. And so there's going to be advantage areas that I think are relevant to each specific affirmative case, which I think make very good topics because it's sort of like narrow. So you're going to have disadvantages related to military presence in the Arctic, and these are going to be your, Russian aggression disadvantages or encirclement disadvantages. These are going to be, we've seen on the PF topic pretty common disadvantages about the military's environmental presence. I think that sort of gets magnified by the economic exploration or development of the Arctic, because we're going to see the same stuff, whether that's drilling, whether it's icebreakers. There's going to be kind of an economic impact to the Arctic. And so I think that makes for like solid case turn debate. Likewise, I think that politics will still likely be an argument. I think that link probably goes the other way for some of the affirmatives. I think that it's generally Democrats who are largely more opposed to things like drilling or development of Arctic lands, which, I think that are currently a lot of them are under protected status. But I think that still means that there's going to be good links to those arguments. The counter plans, there's obviously going to be a lot of international actor counter plans that maybe potentially can solve some of the affirmative stuff. I think that there's going to be some carryover from the NATO topic in terms of counter plans, whether those are even just like have NATO do the plan. which I think is like probably a viable counterplan. I think that on this topic, the affirmative has to defend unilateral U.S. action. I don't think they could say the United States should increase military presence in the Arctic as a function of NATO. Maybe they could. Maybe that's a tea debate to have. But if I was the negative, I would sort of hold that line so that they get access to do XYZ thing as like a component of NATO or something like that. And then you're also just going to get, your Garden Variety cheating counter plans, consult the Arctic Council counter plans, have the Arctic Council do the plan counter plans, things like that. So I think it'll be a fun topic that'll have a diversity of negative argumentation. But similar to the ACT topic, I think the terms are pretty clearly defined. So I think that while there will be topicality debates, I think that they won't be so numerous as to wreck the topic, but rather very substantive in terms of what counts as economic development or what counts as military, So I think that those are like pretty solid topics.
Cool. Do you think the security K that got kind of popular on last year's topic would play a role on the American Arctic one as well? Like especially like military presence?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely that component of the topic. I think even your economic affirmatives, a lot of the justifications for economic development of the Arctic region are going to have impact like change in stems that are still going to link to the security K. I think the security K and the cap K are going to be stalwarts of the critical ground on that topic. And then depending on like the affirmative, you also might get to see some of like the environmental security criticisms if the affirmative is trying to say, this might be a TA to have, but some sort of economic development of the Arctic aimed at like the need to protect it or something. I think that you're going to get into that sort of literature base about this idea of protecting nature or controlling nature or something like that. So I think there will be really cool K-ground on the topic for sure. Certainly K-ground links, which is going to generate good debates, which I think is ultimately, I hope, the goal of the topic selection process is we choose a topic that generates good debates. So
yeah. Problem area 3, critical infrastructure. Resolved, the United States federal government should substantially increase its critical infrastructure protection of chemical and or nuclear sectors in the United States. It's kind of a weighty topic.
Good topic. This was the topic I alluded to. It was written by the two high schoolers from Missouri. I believe they are now both like entering their freshman year of college, but I could be wrong. But still, a huge undertaking by them. An impressive feat to get a topic to the committee. I think we had like 16 or 17 papers this year and get it to the final 5. So tip of the cap to them. This topic, when initially proposed, was just increased protection of critical infrastructure. And then we sort of looked at the list and there was like 10 or 12 or something like that areas of critical infrastructure. So the first kind of big wording change in the topic committee was that we need to sort of narrow this down to a couple of areas. And we chose chemical and nuclear because I think they sounded cool and they kind of have potentially big impact advantage areas. I will say that out of the 5 topics, I guess I'm on here for my opinion. I think this is probably one of the weaker, it's the weakest of the 5. And I think that was, some of it was because when it was narrowed down, there wasn't a lot of discussion of, okay, if we choose these areas, what are the particular affirmatives that could be read beyond just, we need to protect our nuclear resources more, we need to protect our chemical resources more. This is a topic that, just like the water topic with the term protection, there's going to be a debate about what that means. And I think that sometimes is good if you really like tea debates, sometimes it's bad because it kind of allows affirmatives to stretch the boundaries of the topic a little bit. For example, I'm not sure if an affirmative that was like, we need to convert all existing U.S. nuclear energy to Generation 4 reactors, that would certainly seem to protect our nuclear resources, but at the same time, not sure if that actually is protection. And then there's also a discussion, and I'm pretty sure we worded this to limit it out, that whether or not nuclear weapons would be covered under this resolution, because there was some worry about the overlap with the other resolution. And I think that the conclusion was that nuclear weapons likely were not covered under this version of the resolution because they're not considered nuclear critical infrastructure. That's more referring to like nuclear power plants and things of that nature. that being said, I am like certain in my core that there are very cool affirmatives on this topic. I know on the policing topic, we ran this kind of goofy affirmative to increase the policing of uh, like federal nuclear things, because we just found evidence that like a lot of like things like the National Institute of Health has like nuclear materials that don't have a lot of guards because they use those nuclear materials for various medical things. Um, and we found evidence like even back then that like there was kind of like domestic like white nationalisty terror groups that were looking to potentially like steal these materials, or at least they potentially could try to. So there certainly are going to be cool affirmatives about the need to protect our domestic critical infrastructure. I think my larger concern with this topic is that I'm not sure what the core negative ground is. So while I think this is a cool topic, and I think that if you laid it on the table in front of kids, they're going to say, heck yeah, this sounds really cool. I do have some questions about what the negative will be able to say. Obviously, it made the slate of Final Five, so I think that there are some negative arguments. There's some reasons why maybe we should not increase the protection of our critical infrastructure related to cost, related to it's debate. We're always going to arguments. There's going to be K arguments. There's going to be counter plans. It might be a topic very similar to NATO, where we see kind of the proliferation of various process counterplans, and a lot of counterplan theory debate, which is, if you're a 2A minded person, sounds terrible. If you're a 2N minded person, that sounds amazing. And so I don't think that this topic will be one where the negative is just totally, hapless, but I do think that it maybe struggles a little more with what is like a core disadvantage of the topic that most people can read every single round, or at least most every round. That's not just like this might cost a lot of money. And so that's kind of where I get a little bit of pause on this topic. But like I said, I think the slate of Final Five was a great slate, and like probably the best slate we could have put together. So I think this is still like a good topic if someone is dead set on voting for it. So
Okay. Let's move on to the next one. Problem area 4, intellectual property rights. The United States federal government should significantly strengthen its protection of domestic intellectual property rights and copyrights, patents, and other trademarks. Like this one's like stands out big to me. Like last year's case, we ran like TikTok at UIL State talking about like just the quote unquote cyber threat from China on the aft. So like this one really stuck out to me when I was looking over. I thought it was a cool one. What were the thoughts up at the national convention?
So yeah, this was my topic paper. And I set out with wanting to do kind of a novel topic. Those my two goals. I want to do something new that had never been debated, and I kind of looked back through and saw that neither high school or college has ever discussed intellectual property. And then I also want to do something that's insulated from the state's counterplan. And it turns out that intellectual property protections is pretty much exclusively the domain of the federal government, going all the way back to the founding of the Constitution. So those check the two boxes. I got to work on it. I fully admit this is like the least sexiest on face of the topics. And so I think that was always my concern going into the topic meeting, and obviously still my concern now. But I think that the discussion at the meeting was really good, because I think that when you start digging into this topic, there is a lot there for both affirmative and negative ground. The beauty of the topic is that the bulk of the affirmatives are going to come on the patent side, at least the policy affirmatives. And patent lawyers and people write a ton. There is so much evidence on the internet. In fact, the easiest part of writing this paper was tracking down sites to sort of support all the claims, because you could get 20 sites per claim if you wanted relatively easily. The other benefit is that a lot of law journals are now open access, as that kind of movement has gained some steam. And so when putting together a topic paper, one of the initial concerns from the kind of working group of people on the topic papers was, would this be an accessible topic? Because it's a lot of the good literature is going to be in law journals. And I was able to open source the entirety of the topic paper. All the quotes came from full access articles, and I was really pleased by that. So I consulted some with Matt Merle, who works for UIL and kind of helps run CX State as well. he was a former patent attorney, now teaching law at UT, and he sort of confirmed that, yeah, like there's a ton of literature. Most of it's going to be very easily accessible and open source. And so that's really cool. The topic has the affirmative strength and protections, which I think that intuitively everyone probably thinks that U.S. patent protections are always very strong. And I think that because the popular movement currently is the opposite, that we need to either eliminate or substantially loosen patent protection, especially on things like pharmaceutical drugs and stuff like that. So I wanted a topic that moved counter to that. I wanted the affirmative to have to defend potentially unpopular action and hard policy. But what I learned is that over the past 15 or so years, the United States has also actually been moving in the opposite direction. We've time after time weakened our patent laws and the ability for those who own patents to protect the infringement of those patents, to protect against the infringement of those patents in courts of law. And that's a move that was sort of made through a variety of legal and congressional decisions, both legislation that was passed and Supreme Court decisions. And it was all sort of done with this aim to curb what are called patent trolls, which are people who own patents. They don't actually make the product, but as soon as you make a new product that does something similar to the patent I own, I'm going to sue you and say that you owe me money if you want to use my patent. And that was a huge concern amongst the legal community. And so they took a lot of steps to loosen patent protection. And so there's a lot of literature saying that we may have gone too far, that we need to go in the opposite way. And there's a lot of affirmative cases that sort of based off of that. You're going to have just general affirmative cases that are going to say things like, we should increase the amount, the length that a patent can sort of exist for in the context of medicine. Or you're going to have potentially more specific affirmatives that are going to say, the Supreme Court should overturn their ruling in the eBay versus Merck exchange. Or there's a lot of evidence that says Congress should litigate over this ruling, right? So you kind of have flexibility with your agent. There's other kind of like, the deeper you get, there's stuff like the Alice Mayo test, which is a test to determine whether a patent can be established in the first place, that people say should be strengthened. And so there's a lot of different areas that you can sort of strengthen the protections of patents. It's not just in how easy is it for you to defend those in court, but it's also how easy is it to apply for a patent in the first place? How novel do things have to be? So there's a ton of affirmative ground there from the policy realm and patents. Trademarks and copyrights were added. There are a few affirmative cases that are policy leaning in those areas, but the critical
Preston,
literature in those is, yeah, what's up? All right, so back from the break, I think that, we were talking about the critical affirmatives on the topic, and that was the big impetus and push behind adding copyrights and trademarks. There are a handful of policy affirmatives, but I don't think that there are so many that it explodes the topic. But in those particular areas, there are some really cool K or K leaning affirmatives that can both defend a plan, or that really just can defend a plan if they want. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff about the ways in which copyright, I think everyone's knee gut reaction is like, okay, cool, copyright topic. All the K literature is going to be negative, saying property rights bad. And that's true. There's a ton of it. But there is a lot of interesting literature that says, we can use like critical legal studies to remedy some of the past wrongs of copyright, specifically as it relates to the theft of music or musical copyright from female artists and Black artists kind of throughout history. One of the common ways is that the way music used to be copyrighted was you copyrighted the scores that were written down. And so that allowed for, even if someone had a song, but they were not musically literate, especially a lot of like early like blues and jazz musicians, that other people would come behind them and write the notes to the songs down and then copyright it themselves. And the same is sort of true for trademark, which is images. There's a lot of literature that's come out about how you have, for instance, like a Trayvon Martin type case where someone dies and their name and their image and their likeness is used on clothing, and the family kind of requests that it's not. But the family is not able to control the use of those images. And so there's a reasonably strong literature base that actually says that in these instances, the solution is to strengthen copyright protections for remedying these problems. I think it creates some really interesting further cases. And then,
Wait,
you
wait,
know,
wait, wait,
for
wait, 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 wait. So are you telling me I can put together a Taylor Swift affirmative?
yeah, theoretically, yes, very much so. I think that is one of the examples I used in the intro to my topic paper of why I think this is very interesting to high schoolers is that there is obviously a lot sort of surrounding the Taylor Swift controversy in general of ownership of music and things like that. And then, a lot of us high school teachers have students who do a variety of things. I certainly am probably not the only coach in Texas or the country that has athletes in their debate team as well. And copyright, trademark protection definitely gets you into the realm of name, image, and likeness territory, the new hot button issue of college that everyone's sort of asking for federal action on, anyways. So there is probably affirmative cases centered around that as well. So I think this is a topic that, on face, people look at and they're like, oh, that sounds boring. Which is kind of what I thought when I started researching it. But I thought it turned out really cool, and I think that it actually speaks to a lot of different interests that students have without realizing how central copyright stuff is to their day-to-day lives. On the negative, I think the arguments are just as good. One of the cool things when researching this topic was for pretty much every article that I found for the affirmative, whether saying this helped the economy or this helped the medical industry or this helped the tech industry, there were just as many articles from the negative perspective saying this will not help, this will hurt, things like that. There is not a consensus necessarily that strengthening copyright is good or bad, but there is a lot of debate discussion, which I think means the case debate on this resolution is going to be incredibly rich. And I think that for those of us who compete at UAL State, and we know that we have to adapt to our judging there, having a topic where there is good, robust case debate is such a nice thing. I know that looking at the splits on the NATO topic, given it was a very counterplan heavy topic, at UAL State, it was like the affirmative won so many times at UAL State this year because it was just really hard to be negative. And I think that will not necessarily be the case. You have a bunch of strong disads, the patent troll disad, the reason behind why we've been loosening our or patent restrictions and protections anyways, is very much true. There is an inevitable trade-off between strengthening patent protections and also strengthening patent trolls. There's going to be things like the drug prices disad. And then also, this will be coming around in election year, and I think that you're going to get some potentially really cool sort of midterm disads early in the season because the Democrats' platform is kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place where they want to look both friendly to businesses, but also maintain their sort of like younger, more progressive base, who are very, very, very big advocates of eliminating, in many instances, patent protections for things like medicine and stuff. So I think that the government passing this potentially risks alienating a large voting bloc of the populace. And I think that creates some interesting scenarios when it comes to sort of midterms elections disads. Like I said, it's insulated from the state's counterplan, but I think there's a bunch of other very interesting counterplans because the negative basically gets all of the reform, weakened, etc. counterplans, which I think would be very interesting. There's a lot of literature that just we should abolish the sort of intellectual property regimes of America. And then the K literature is very robust. I think the case section of the paper that I wrote was like, you literally can just type whatever K literature base you were interested in and then put and intellectual property into like Google Scholar, and you're just going to like find articles. And I just like would find an article and post like a link. And so I think that the negative is going to have a lot of weapons in their arsenal. I think there's going to be a lot of good debates on it. And then I think that the best thing for it is as the topic matures and you have older debaters who are doing a lot more research, they're going to find even better, more case-specific arguments because you're going to find people who specifically say, if we reverse this court decision, here are the downstream effects of it. Because copyright strengthening does not happen in a vacuum. There are always downstream effects on industry, on the law, on legal precedent set. And so I think that creates a lot of very generative negative debating that can happen as you go throughout the season. I selfishly, I think, have this in my top two, but certainly I know that I was struggling a bit with whether I wanted it or another topic. But um, the other big plug that I made kind of the topic committee meeting is college. The rotation is domestic, foreign, legal, and then kind of like a wild card where it can be any. In high school, we just have foreign and domestic. And I don't think we really debate many truly legal topics. The last one that kind of was close to it was criminal justice reform. And even that was focused more on the policy side rather than the legal side. And this is a topic that has a very clear legal focus. A lot of the research will be done reading law journals. And so while the basic mechanics of understanding patents are very easy for even novices to understand, at the higher level, some of the most fun topics I've ever coached have been LD legal topics because I've just learned so much about something that I didn't know. And I think that given we have a lot of kids who want to be future lawyers, it's a great taste of what that sort of research is like. So I think it turned out to be a cool topic that I think would make a great year-long resolution if it was chosen.
So, Kenny, when you were at Marshall, you were friends with a patent lawyer for a little while. I bet if this was the topic, you would kind of be wishing you were still back over there in Marshall.
No, man, I've got his number on speed dial. I actually had the pleasure of coaching the patent lawyer who was on one of the lead lawyers on the Samsung Apple patent case.
That's awesome.
Incredible dude. That entire firm, McCool Smith out of East Texas and out of the DFW area. I don't know if you're familiar, but there was a season. So there's been some change in the legalities, but Marshall was actually the patent capital of the country.
Whoa. I did know this because a lot of the patent cases, they occur in the federal circuit courts, and they really like going through the one that's in the Northeast Texas area because it is the most friendly to litigants.
Yep. I've gotten to sit at some of those tables and listen to some of those guys talk, and it's those conversations. I actually got to sit on a focus group and have some interesting conversations. I can't really share more than that because of an NDA, but it's an interesting process. That patent law
it's interesting and it's intense and it's complex, but that's a point I never even thought about. But I think that probably a lot of programs have people who now work in the legal profession, and I think it probably creates some opportunities to build bridges with alumni who can come back and talk to this as like experts in the field very easily. So that would be cool for programs too if they have that.
Well, that, and it forces our kids to potentially reach out to some of those lawyers and make contacts and rub shoulders and, start that channeling of, all right, cool. Hey, I think I want to do this. This language doesn't make sense to me. Can you help me? So there's some cool conversations that professionally can help our students as well.
Oh, absolutely. I think so. Yeah, it's not on paper. It's not the most exciting sounding, but I actually think it would turn into a good year of debate. So.
Kenny, you want to cover problem area 5?
So I'm going to introduce problem area 5, and then the core question I'm going to ask you is how is it different than problem area number 3? Problem area 5 is the nuclear weapons resolution. And outside of the obvious, the United States federal government should substantially reduce its size and or restrict the roles of its nuclear weapons arsenal. I mean, how does this differ from the nuclear chemical topic that we have? How does
so this was a discussion at the topic committee meeting to make sure these were different. And so the nuclear chemical topic is going to be more about nuclear power and nuclear power plants. And this topic is very much focused on nuclear weapons and nuclear weapon policy. This topic and the Arctic topic are like domestic topics that flirt a lot with international topics as well. There's obviously a huge international relations component to both of them, which I think, for me, I think I kind of prefer international topics maybe a little bit. So, it makes them like strong considerations for me because I think that, the literature is kind of easy to understand. You have like core disadvantages, and you get big impacts. They go boom. And so I think that that's something that's always a little fun. But this topic, a lot of time was spent on the wording to make sure that we didn't accidentally backdoor in nuclear power to this topic, and that we didn't, or at least tried as much as possible to exclude nuclear weapons from the other topics, so that we would have two sort of distinct topic areas. I think that similar to the Arctic paper, having the crossover with the current PF1. I think that a concern that some coaches may have with this topic is that it is the current policy resolution or is very similar to the current policy resolution for college debate. It's a more broad version. The college policy resolution is very narrow, but focused on nuclear weapons for sure and nuclear weapons reduction. That was kind of the main source of controversy for this topic at the topic committee meeting. Was there was some concern over that, and I think that the arguments in favor of it are pretty strong. The benefit is it proves that it can sustain a year of debate, because we're going to get to see that proof of concept from college debate, and that had this been 10 years ago or 20 years ago, where there wasn't kind of the standards for disclosure and open sourcing of evidence, then it probably would not be a great topic, because all of that good college knowledge would stay siloed within the college debaters and the programs that have access to those kids, whether via alumni or coaching resources and stuff. And I think that that is less of a worry now, because all the college stuff is open sourced on the wiki online. And so now you have a topic where, like, open evidence is great that we get access to camp files, but now you get access to evidence from an entire year of college debate and all that research is done. So I think that the cool thing about this topic is, like, out of the gate, the affirmative and negative cases are going to be incredibly strong and well developed. And it's going to lead to immediately, like, good debates that feature deep clash. And then obviously the debate camp should also be able to put together great argument file sets so that they can get those kids, like, clash and, like, learning skills very quickly, because it shouldn't be too difficult, one, to put the files together, and two, we kind of have an idea of here are a core set of topics. And then because the high school resolution is more broad than the college one, as this resolution gets to mature, then you sort of get to see new affirmatives and new areas of the topic get to emerge that weren't on in the college topic. And then, you know, the debate nerd in me just thinks that it would be an interesting thought experiment to see functionally what would happen if we, you know, how good do affirmative and negative cases get when you have not 1 year, but, like, functionally 2 full years of people thinking about and doing research on a topic. Like, how much evidence can we find? How good can it get? And so that's, like, very intriguing to me. You know, I think that this will be a topic that I think kids on Face will be excited for, and probably, like, push coaches for, because they're just like, nuclear weapons, and they get to, like, talk about those. I know that on the college topic, there's a lot of cases currently. No first use is super, super, super popular. There was an executive powers topic a couple years back, and no first use was a huge case. I think that's, like, easy core of the topic. Case number one is the U.S. should adopt a no first use policy. There seem to be some college affirmatives about ending our, like, ICBMs or something like that. I think there's a lot of ICBM affirmatives, and those are just, like, things that I know from hearing, like, alumni that I have who are debating college, like, talk about it. But I actually haven't even dug into the college wiki to see a lot of what's sort of come out of it. But I know that those will be, like, kind of the two big starter cases. The negative side, you have two core topic disadvantages that I think are debated fairly regularly on international topics, but the link to them is now much, much, much more true, which is the deterrence disad. Nuclear weapons are key to deterrence. Reducing our nuclear forces or adopting a no first use policy obviously hurts that. And the people who say that, you know, nuclear weapons are the only thing that is preventing countries like Russia and China from attacking us, or, you know, they're very adamant about that. And then we also have the assurances disad, which is a lot of our allies are reliant on the U.S. nuclear umbrella to protect them, and certainly think they do. And it's a large reason why they alone have not developed their own nuclear weapons. You know, East Asia alone, I certainly can see South Korea and Japan having a large problem if the United States decided to substantially reduce its nuclear armament or adopt a policy of no first nuclear use or something like that. And it might, especially somewhere like Japan that's been having a bigger right-wing push to remilitarize, I certainly can, you know, there's solid link arguments that would sort of lead to those scenarios. You know, counterplan wise, I think you're going to get access to this topic's very insulated from a lot of your sort of actor counter plans. Only the United States government can reduce its own nuclear weapons stockpiles. But maybe you certainly get access to all of your consult counter plans and things like that, your staples of semi-international topics, as well as like, you might be able to play around with like counter plans that have Russia and China adopt a different, like a no first use policy or something instead. Maybe that would work. I'm curious to sort of see what comes out of the college topic in terms of diversity of counterplan debate. The K debate on nukes is super cool. The literature is great. Obviously, people who are interested in critical literature and critical arguments love to write about nuclear weapons. They love to write about the military's use or non-use of them. And so the affirmative and the negative have access to all sorts of like really interesting K literature. And I think that's like kind of a strength of nuclear topics is you kind of get to take maybe cards that previously had been shuffled away. It's just like occasional links to affirmative advantages. And now those literature bases become full 1 and C critiques. So that's like a pretty cool aspect of this topic. So yeah, I'm curious to see if it'll make the final 2. Honestly, I think I can see a path to any of the 5 topics making the final 2. They all have some advantages and disadvantages, so I think it's a pretty good slate. But I think the nuclear topic, the biggest advantage is very debatable on both sides. And I think that high schools will be able to make good use of all the college evidence that will exist freely online to kind of build a nice baseline of files, which I think will help everyone sort of across the board grow debate, increase debate skills, stuff like that if this topic was chosen. So I certainly understand there's the fear potentially of repeating the college topic, but I think that it wouldn't be the end of the debate world for sure.
And
Cool.
would you argue that this might be one of the like bridges to equity? Because the small schools who had a very down year, when the topics are rolled out in February, I mean, they could start their prep season.
They literally can. They can start looking at the college stuff. They can start gathering all that evidence. I think that I think it very much helps. Like I said, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when evidence was not as easily available online, like 10 years ago, I think that the college had a nukes topic in like 2011, maybe 2010, something like that. And the wiki would like just started then. And so it was only sites and they were like bad sites and like hard to track down and stuff. And now, I mean, it's like full piece of evidence. And so, back then, huge advantage if you were a team who had the resource of being close to a college or, alumni who debated in college. And now there's obviously still some advantage, but it's way leveled. And I do think that the fact that they can go onto the college wiki, start doing research. I mean, heck, even watch debate rounds from the NDT that are never going to get streamed and put online to like start feeling out what the topic is going to look like. In its sort of very core sense, I think would be incredibly helpful to like teams and programs because there's just going to be so much like physical evidence and also just like videoed evidence of rounds like we watched and flowed, and you can hear, oh, this is how these really good debaters are making and framing this argument. I can listen to it and formulate my own like wording of it very similar to how they do. I mean, God, it seems time consuming, but they could theoretically find a speech they really liked on the assurance dissat and transcribe that entire 2NR and use it to then make their blocks and their analytic arguments. And I just think that I think there's the potential for some very high quality debates at the high school level on this topic if it's chosen because of that. Like the kids who put in the work and watch those videos and track down that evidence and keep up with what college teams are reading, what the kids who really nerd out on debate, I think will benefit a lot from it. And I think that, it's nice to have topics that reward kids who work hard. So I think it could definitely be a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. So out of the 5 topics that you've done a great job covering over the course of the podcast, which one of these do you think had the best discussion there at the convention?
In terms of people seeming interested in like asking like questions about all the arguments and fleshing it out, I kind of think the IP paper had a lot because people had a lot of questions that I think I answered fairly well. It seemed like a lot of people liked it. The ag paper is, I think, probably though the true answer there. Not because this year there was a lot of discussion, but last year there was. And it was a really good domestic paper from last year. And so this year, I think actually the lack of discussion on the ag paper was a lot of its strength because there are a lot of people that come to these meetings year after year. And so most of the discussion was just like, this paper was great last year. A lot of people wanted it in their final two. We know it's a good topic. Let's do it again. And so people were very at ease with the split on the ag paper. I think that, you know, I know that people from the topic meeting, I know a lot of people ag will be in their top two. But, once the topics leave the meeting, it's up to the states and the coaches of those states or whatever process they use. And so sometimes, things that you think were really good don't end up in the top two. But I left that meeting last year thinking ag was my number one topic. And certainly wasn't surprised by the two that made the slate. Like Bricker writes really good topic papers. I think they were both pretty solid topics, but definitely wanted ag as my top one. I think this year again, like big fan of ag. Just I think it encompasses a lot of the things I like. It's new. It's got good debate. I think it's an important topic for kids. But when choosing my top two for UIL, it was like a tough decision because I kept sort of ag was always a constant, and then the other one that I wanted in there, I kept just putting topics in and out because I think Arctic, nuclear weapons, and IP all offer very different things and also all offer very good things, and so I don't think you can really go wrong with a final slate of any of those four. So
Okay, cool. Can you have any other questions?
All right, Preston, I'm going to ask you to pull out your crystal ball.
all right.
If we held you down and said you had to pick one, which topic do you think we're debating in 24-25?
I think I'm gonna go with nukes because I
And we're
think
talking the nuclear arsenal, not the nuclear power plant.
yes, nuclear weapons. I think the kids push coaches because they're like nukes are cool, and my experience with topic voting seems to be the topic that the kids think is the coolest generally ultimately wins out, whether that's because coaches just let their kids fill out the ballot or coaches doing good coach things, listen to some of what their kids want. The pause is I can see a strong case for Arctic as well, especially if people really like the PF topics. So we'll see. IP, love it. Think it'd be a great topic. Hope people vote for it. But push come to shove, I think that it sounds on surface not exciting enough that I think that some people aren't going to pick it. But we'll see. But I'm hoping that if we get a final two of ag and something that people will realize that ag is good and vote for it to do something new. So we'll see. I'm excited about any of the four possibilities.
So,
All right. Well,
before we kind of round this out, because we've got a good chunk in the second half and we've done a great job tonight. Preston, you've been coaching for a long time. It kind of breaks my brain a little bit to know that we're around the same age. All three of us in that 09, 010 cycle. So we've probably been coaching for about the same amount of time. You've had a lot of success, a lot of war stories, and you've been on a lot of panels. You run the tab room for UIL State for small school and large school. Any advice or wisdom you want to share with coaches out there, maybe getting involved or seasoned, or just something that maybe you do that we don't? Share a little bit of that insight that you've garnered over the years.
I think the advice I give to new coaches is get involved. Be a nerd, judge debates. I know a lot of new coaches are very worried about judging debates, and I think that is the best way to learn is talking to your kids and doing as much as possible. Like I think that oftentimes coaches get deterred because they're worried they'll be a bad judge or they don't know as much as someone else, so they can't offer advice, which I think is like not true. I think that smart people can pick up debate very easily, but it does take effort, and so that's my advice. Get involved, meet coaches, talk to those coaches, and you'll find how much you learn and grow advice for growing a team. I was just reflecting this year. We finally hit the mark of having over 100 kids in our program, and me and the speed coach were like, "That's crazy." And I was like, "Yeah, it's really crazy. It's twice as big as my graduating class." And as I've enter year 9 of coaching, I think that the biggest advice that I have as a coach, both for I think building a team and keeping everyone's expectations and focus and stuff, is like, obviously I set very high goals for my team and I push the kids a lot to always be doing better. But the mantra that I've really found resonating with me a lot the past like 2 years, when we've honestly been even more successful, is it's just high school speech and debate. And the wins should not be over celebrated, because I think that the team bonding and building is more important, and the losses certainly should not be taken that hard, because it is just high school speech and debate. And I think that if we as coaches are not having fun and our students are not having fun, then it's all just contentious and competitive, then I'm not sure why we're doing it. And I think that leads to burnout. And so that's my advice, is keep it fun. Dress up in a costume for that Halloween tournament, or take the kids to like see something cool when you get a chance on like a road trip, or hell, just go on road trips to tournaments. I love the road trip to nationals because I think it's like a fun chance to like hang out and bond with the kids. So that's my advice. It's like, if you keep debate fun, it seems like the kids enjoy it, and I don't think that you have to compromise standards of success for fun. I think it can both be done. And I think that's made me a happier person and coach to not take our losses so hard. And I think it's like helped the kids too, to have a better attitude and not burn out when they're, in a slump, or, or the vice versa. Have that sophomore who's way overperforming for a sophomore get a little high on their own supply, and then, get cocky. So I think it like kind of keeps people even keeled. And I think that's a good thing. That would be my advice. Keep it fun. And remember that at the end of the day, it's just high school speech and debate. And we're all here to learn and grow.
That's great advice. I'll try to live that same stuff out in my program for sure. Well, Preston, thanks for coming on. We appreciate it. To our listeners, sorry we had that little break. We had some technical difficulties with the podcast, with shooting stuff out, and but we are back at it, and hopefully we'll get back to our one video a week. Thanks for joining us, and join us next time for the First Constructive Speech and Debate podcast.
Thank you guys for having me. Bye.